Hey everyone, it's Hydro Pump here, and today I have a special guest, Roghnach here, and he is going to be showing off his crazy deck that he topped the Ribbit 1 Season 2, and it looks like it's a Turbo Rocket Frog Burn pile. Welcome to the channel, Roghnach.
Glad to be here.
Awesome. Uh, so you topped Ribbit 1. How was the tournament experience, and how was playing this deck?
I mean, I always like the ribbits. They're great, and it's a good way to spend the day. Even if you lose, you just like watch the stream. Sometimes you even get to talk on the stream. Just do what you want. You get to hang out and see people doing fun stuff in Edison.
Yeah. Fortunately, I wasn't able to play or be involved too much with this tournament because I was busy that weekend. I was planning to play the weekend before, but then it got canceled because of technical difficulties, and then I had plans for the next weekend, so a little unfortunate. But I'll catch the next one. So
Yeah, I mean, you show up to most of them and you do really well overall. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, we get the
Anyway,
Team Ring of Destruction vibes going. Doing pretty good at these tournaments.
yeah, we always manage to rep it, and it's always
Yeah,
because we get lots of great players like Hydropump, like Cameron, like Silchus, like everyone
yeah.
all playing at once. Why not?
Cool. Well, I have one question before we start this deck profile about the deck. Uh, were you under the influence when you built this deck?
I mean, actually, what was? Oh, I was like, I woke up 2 hours before I was going to work, and I had a lot of lesson plans to plan, and I was getting my stuff ready. And as I was procrastinating a little bit, I happened to come across someone talking about Turbo Cannon, Turbo Rocket, and I was like, oh, hey, uh, Faye. Faye is one of our members of our team. Faye is really into Burn. And unfortunately, Faye so far is still like at the bottom of the Edison ladder in format library, but he'll get there. He'll eventually crack it. We have faith in Faye. But in any case, I was talking to Faye about this card, Turbo Rocket and Turbo Cannon, and I was like, "Hey, this would be a great thing in a Burn Frog deck. Uh, you should make one of those, Faye." And then he was like, "Oh yeah, maybe I'll do that sometime." And I was like, "Well, wait a minute. Okay, I mean, I've been like handed these ideas of Burn Frog before, and like, um, I've put together my own pile of cards that might work in Burn Frog before." So I was like, "All right, all right, all right. Let me just take a couple minutes here to like put something together."
Yeah,
So that was Friday, and that
the
was the day
guy,
before.
the frog guy that plays frogs with everything, telling someone else to play frogs.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And that's like the exciting thing about seeing all these connections with cards, because like we're still really new into Edison format. Like there's so many things that are always discovered every tournament.
2 or 3 years
What's really
into it
exciting
too.
then is to know is like knowing that whatever you come across next, there could completely be something new that no one's made that connection before, that no one's put two and two together, and like you can run with things and it actually can work. And this is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, I'd have to say so myself. Can't really say I thought of like Turbo Rocket and frogs going together, but here we are. It apparently works pretty well.
I was
Uh,
surprised too, to be honest.
yeah, you always post like some crazy decks in our team Discord. I'm like, what is going on? And I had the joke that you were making like, frog dragons, and then a couple weeks later you ended with the list or something. I was like, oh my god. But yeah, we can jump into the deck list, and then you can just run away with it, and then but yeah, uh, I guess we can start. I don't know if you can see my screen, but I was just gonna go down the list here, or however you want to do it.
Well, yeah, I tend to organize my list in like in terms of categories of stuff. So I guess we'll talk about the frogs themselves
Yeah.
first. You know what? Actually, no, we'll come to the frogs later. I actually want to talk about the individual burn cards because those are the main important things. And the way I put the deck together was all kind of around the burn cards. So we'll actually start with the rocket itself.
Okay.
So the rocket is the main thing that I started with, and I was like, okay, okay. So the concept of the deck from the beginning is that frogs, just by doing their thing, they end up burning the opponent a lot. I think people will find that quite often. Like you summon a monarch and like, okay, you just instantly did 2400. Wow, that's a crazy burn card in itself. Or Caius also does 1000. Or so sometimes you do 3400 damage. Or Swap Frog just attacking directly, that's 1000 every turn. And so if you have ever burned, or have you, what am I trying to say? If you have ever played a burn deck before, then like you can imagine a card that does 1000 damage every turn is a really crazy card. And that's just Swap Frog. That's just like the absolute basics. So then when you tie together also stuff like Brain Control and Enemy Controller and Caius and Ryza, um, and all of these things together, like suddenly automatically you're kind of putting your opponent at like half their life points just by naturally doing the thing you were going to do anyway. And then you can also have instances where like you Caius something or you want to like monarch something really important, so they solemn that, and suddenly they're at 4,000 life points. So in frogs in general, you are constantly in these situations where you might be behind an advantage, but you've really put them low on life points. And I figured like I might as well develop this concept just to see if it becomes the case that you end up being able to play the game on a different axis rather than having to just like special summon a lot and establish a board. Maybe instead you could just like squeeze out a victory by just like throwing all of your hand at your opponent and just leaving them with 0 life points by the end of it. So that was the concept.
Yeah.
So then Turbo Rocket, yeah,
Oh,
go
sorry. I was
ahead.
just gonna say like this is ironically like the best burn deck, uh, without trying to be a burn deck. Uh,
I'm thinking it might be,
yeah.
literally. I don't know.
I mean, who knows? I think Burn's a little underlooked. I know Faye digs into Burn a lot. He's probably played 2,000 matches with Burn in Edison format, but uh,
Damn.
yeah, there's a lot of ideas with Burn. But I was just gonna say quickly, that thing kind of left my mind. um, oh yeah, like life points are like an actual resource in Edison format. I know like we go all kind of turn like a blind eye to it. Like oh, just throw upstarts into the deck. Life points don't matter. Kind of like the modern mindset of like Yu-Gi-Oh, like the past 10 years or so. Like life points don't matter, but like in Edison format, it's actually a real resource. You can be up all those cards like you said, and then you just lose due to life points.
For sure. And that's literally like how frogs win a lot of the time, just because like you end up top decking a Caius or something, and because like they might have like 5 or 6 cards left, but they have 2,400 life points, well then great, you just won.
Yeah, you just
That's the
cheesed out
dumb
the
thing.
win.
Yeah. And effectively, yeah, that's exactly it. This is like what the deck is designed to do. Um, and I think this is like the first draft effectively. And this was like literally built the day before the event.
It's crazy.
And like I mean I brought it to ladder or not to ladder to like just put it on DB like unrated or what do you call it? Like DB randoms. And it won like 10 in a row. And that's my standard benchmark for like, okay, a deck might have something going for it if you can beat like 10 random people in a row on DB. I think that's normally a good way to
Yeah.
go about it.
Yeah, not to get too sidetracked, but like way back in the day, probably about 2 years from now, or 2 years ago, when I was developing Dragon Turbos, like I kind of just it was kind of just like a weird concept I had for a deck, and then like that week right before Edison Legends, it like molded into like an actual deck, and then I was just smoking like randoms online. I was like, well, I guess I'll play this deck and see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of like, when I saw the Dragon Turbo at first, I was like, I'm pretty sure I've seen this before. Like, how has no one ever like taken this seriously before? Like, even stuff like the Future Fusion interaction, like thinning the deck for 5 and then searching 3 and then going off with trade in and stuff. Like, it just felt like, yeah, should obviously have been something taken seriously before now.
Yeah. Okay, so that was like all the burn cards. Do you want to jump in something else now? Well, we can
Well,
talk about the
yeah,
turbo
well,
rocket, but
yeah. So Turbo Rocket, like, okay, people have probably seen the effect on the screen there. Like, kind of a lot of the time, what you end up doing is you crash the Turbo Rocket and it protects itself and does half the damage. I mean, you take the full damage, but they take half, and then main phase two, you go Turbo Cannon and kill the guy, and then do the other half. That's one way of doing it. Or you could just kill the guy in the main phase and attack with your other guys. Or you could Waboku in your standby phase, bring back the Treeborn, and then Turbo Rocket, you don't take any damage, and then you do the full damage with Turbo Rocket plus Cannon. There's a bunch of different ways you can use it. Um, I will say in general about Turbo Rocket that there's a couple weaknesses there, which is first of all the cannon, like it takes out one guy, but then it just gets killed. Or you might end up having no Treeborns, and then Turbo Rocket doesn't do very much at all. So I had to come up with ways to handle those situations. And the first one I resolved with like roars and wubokus by protecting the cannon. And people were remarking on this on stream, like, "Oh my God, he has like wubokus. I wonder if he has threatening roars as well." And
of
like
course,
they're
of course.
speculating on whether I was 2-2 or 3-3 or whatever it was. And in the end, yeah, it's 3-3, and it works really well. Like actually, from having discovered how well this worked during that event with 3-3, like having multiples in your hand, I was totally cool with it, and like I actually oftentimes even wanted to have multiple roars and wobokus because it's just the pace of the modern format at the moment, where like people are constantly throwing one string kills on the board like every turn. You kind of like you like having that tempo back every turn because you end up like reversing them with econs or monarchs or lava golems or whatever it is in the stack that you just kind of like dismantle whatever they put on the board trying to kill you. So that's cool.
Yeah, and
But also
it's
the
a
roars
good
and wokus,
good insurance to keep you alive.
totally. And like it works especially well because um, you have the utility frogs, and that's kind of why I like to make as much use as possible out of Roar and Wuboku in general, because there's a lot of monsters in the format that you can use in frogs that actually go well with like with the protection traps, but also that means that the frog engine itself gets to benefit from that too, and that's something you want to be able to do to benefit your frog engine in general, because like if you have an engine that's going with frogs that doesn't actually benefit the frogs themselves, like for example, last month for beast mode, I was trying to build like a zombie frog deck, and that's cool because there's a lot of like interactions with extenders or with floaters that like frogs kind of like tributing goblin zombie or something. But on the other hand, there's a lot of cards that don't actually benefit the frogs whatsoever, and it doesn't really gel so well. Stuff like Book of Life or stuff like Mizuki, like there's not a whole lot of synergy there. So the fact that you have roars and robokus that actually not only help the burn stuff but also help the frogs, I find that that's something that is really important.
Yeah, just looking at this list, first glance, it looks very pretty for Dragon Turbo. With the 3 Roar, the 3 Wabaku, the 3 Vanity, and Crow on the side. I'm just like, oh god. Your list always kind of scare me if I'm ever playing Dragon Turbo. But,
Yeah,
I mean,
and that's kind
there's
of
a lot
because
of
like
decks that's trying to kill, so.
yeah, I found like a lot of my theory for frogs comes from just strictly from format library ladder and having to face all the decks all the time. And when you're on like legend rank and you lose like literally one game out of like five, that's like a really good ratio to like win 80% of games. But oftentimes on ladder, when you're that high on the ladder and you lose one out of five games, it's super punishing for you. So you can't even afford that. And that means like I can't afford to play risky stuff like Fader that just like loses to Dragon Turbo hitting with you with Drago and stuff.
Like
So I
oppression and
found that like yeah, and that's like how I built it over time. But at the same time though, like I'm surprised this did so well as well because it's very different from the frog decks that are topping at the moment. And also the frog decks that I have been bringing to the tournament, they just keep getting sacked by random crap. And I just like at a certain point, it feels like the frog decks that I bring are just missing something, and it's hard to know exactly what. Or what exactly the pattern is in terms of how it keeps losing, and that's why I'm surprised that this one did so well. And I feel like what I'm gonna say about Burn Frogs mostly is that um, while there's a lot of really cool aspects about the deck that I think really allowed it to do well, like the Wabokus and the Roars and stuff, and maybe people the surprise factor, for example, like people had never seen this before. People were totally surprised to see a lava golem, and definitely people didn't know stuff like turbo cannon and turbo rocket. Like people were completely thrown off guard by all these things, and especially when it's like a burn strategy that like you can't afford to be thrown off guard. I think that really helped. But at the same time, I think kind of it was a bit of a coincidence. If I'm going to be pretty honest with you, it's like I felt that a lot of the games I was not punished very hard by bricking. I was not like completely sacked by, say, like a dragon player drawing like 20 cards turn one. That didn't happen a lot during the tournament. And especially, I mean, people saw the game with Soul versus the zombie matchup. Like you probably saw that at the end. Were you watching?
Yeah, I think I watched most of the second day. But I
Yeah,
just
and I
can't
mean,
remember off the top of my head.
yeah. I mean, the problem with that matchup was that I wasn't prepared a lot, as I was kind of mentioning earlier with Turbo Rocket, for what happens when you don't draw Treeborn or when you don't get Treeborn access. And that kind of was the perfect encapsulation of that problem because it took me until like turn literally 15 to draw any frogs. And I think the percentage chance of that happening is like 0.03 or something.
Oh
It's
yeah,
something
you were just drawing
ridiculous.
like so many like spell and trap cards. I vaguely remember that.
Yeah, no kidding. Like literally all of my spells for a single Treeborn. Oh well,
Yeah.
what can you do? But what I'd like to say about that though is that like I was fortunate that it only happened that late in the tournament, and I felt like had that happened to me like say round three or something, there's no chance that people would even know today what Burn Frogs is.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that makes Edison format so interesting is that, you know, every deck kind of has their limits with consistency and like power and stuff. You have to kind of balance them. But yeah, I can't really. I think one thing that helped you is that, you know, you not really knowing how the deck's going to perform to like other people don't really know like what's going on. So um, there's that on your side. Like I feel like with Edison format, it's like if you're doing something like unpredictable, like it can actually like help you out a lot in a tournament run.
Yeah, totally. And I always try to do something unpredictable in tournaments for that reason. And like for example, deck or what was it called? Yeah, Deck Devastators 3. I brought a fairy frog deck that people had never seen before, or at least like most people hadn't, because I know like whenever I'm on Dueling Book, there's always like people trying to spy my games and like Crow's Nest Spy.
The
That probably
creeps.
happens to you too, right?
Uh, Honestly, I don't play like insane amount of games, but every when I do, like someone like always kind of pops in, like get out of here. You know, like start hosting like on no watchers or something.
I might do that actually, to be honest. I didn't even consider it.
Can't leak the goo.
Yeah, true. Uh, Maybe that's like, if anything, maybe that's what this has taught me too. Like, I should do something completely different and completely new, and just not even test it on ladder or anything. Just like completely bring something new next
Something
time.
completely out of left field, but with frogs. I mean, but like the frog engine, like it's pretty small. It's like 10 cards, and you throw some monarchs, and the rest can be whatever you want. So that's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
it's super flexible.
Yeah. Well, do you want to talk about the rest of the list here? We talked about
Yeah,
Turbo Rocket and a couple of cards like
so
Lava Golem, but I don't know if you want to get any more detail with those.
yeah, there's a few burn cards here. Like Marshmallow is a cool way I found like of kind of circumventing the no frogs issue. Like you can just set that and tribute it for a monarch, and it also resists like Vanity's Fiend and stuff, which is cool. So it's just another way to do that extra damage and put them in range. Then Lava Golem was really cool, and that was definitely one of the funnier cards of the tournament. and I thought it worked pretty well, but it tends to work best game ones, and I was always afraid of like running into like Christia, Vanity's Fiends, Dinah, stuff like that. Also, people just playing around Lava Golem, um, kind of in a certain way, like either by summoning fewer monsters or by having it so that they would like not care if I summoned Lava Golem sometimes. So I don't know, like post side I tend to decide it out a little bit, but I mean, there's lots of cool combos with Lava Golem. I mean, you can um, you can kill their guys, then steal it with enemy controller, do 3,000, pass it back, and let it kill them for another 1,000. So I think versus Dimitri, that was almost going to happen, and then he like mirror forced it, which is fine actually, because then I just like traded like what was it like 3 for 2 or something? I
Yeah.
don't even know what. And then you can also creature swap the lava golem. That works too by like swapping them with an attack mode treeborn. Or you could magic cylinder the lava golem, which is even crazier. You could bounce the lava golem with flip flop. You could kill the lava golem with turbo cannon next turn. So I mean, in theory, like on paper, it has a lot of synergy with stuff. And on top of that, it's like an alternate plan for if you don't have Treeborn, like in the late game, if they banish all your Treeborns or something, or if you just don't draw Treeborn, and it lets you kind of like burn them for a while, which is great because you can defend yourself with Cylinder, Roar, Waboku, all that kind of stuff.
And
And then
yeah,
that's
one thing to add to is that like your opponent, like you kind of make your opponent have to like be like OTKU mode because you're either gonna drop Lava Golem on them to take both their monsters, or you're gonna drop a Monarch and take their one if they're playing around Lava Golem. So you either play around a Monarch or Lava Golem, and then they can't OTK you because you have Wabakus and Roars. So kind of puts your opponent in a bind if you have the whole setup really.
yeah. Actually, now you mention it, I think that's actually like one of the psychological things that people were thinking because I think like the more the tournament went on, and people had seen Lava Golem on stream, then people were like a bit psyched out by it. And maybe you're right actually. Like maybe they actually did like um play into monarchs more. And also if you just leave one monster on the board, then I can like steal it with enemy controller and attack directly, which is great in the burn deck. So that's cool. And also like as a burn strategy, you don't even need to like tribute the stolen monster. You can actually just like steal a monster, attack directly, pass it back, and then next turn do the same thing, keep stealing it turn after turn, keep attacking, and then that can actually be a win condition in itself, even without monarchs. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of complicated for the opponent to play around all these cards. Um,
Mm.
cool. So well, you got Magical Cylinder. I don't know if anything spicy happened with this card as far as the last burn card. It looks like.
Actually, round one, I was playing against a fairy player, and so game one, like it was kind of back and forth a little bit, but like yeah, I mean, by the end of it, it was like 1,400 life points. Then he attacks me with Shining Angel, and boom, Magic Cylinder for game, and I was pretty happy with that. And then same round, game two, same thing again, Magic Cylinder, and because of that, I was like, oh my god, I hope like because this is such a crazy new sensational thing to happen. I'm like, oh my god, he's gonna start blabbing about it in the Discord. He's gonna be like on stream, like, oh my god, I lost a magic cylinder, and it was a frog player, and then everyone's gonna like know in advance that I'm on a burn strategy. But thankfully, that didn't happen.
It's like the Edison form of Ring of Destruction.
I was thinking like, oh my god, there must be a card like Ring of Destruction. I kept looking through the card pool, but there just isn't. It's like, oh, because that would have been a really cool thing for the team, right?
Yeah, it's like Ring without the destruction.
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
you know what? This can be like our mascot, like or like our team card of the event.
yeah, we're just gonna change our name to Magical Cylinders.
Something like that.
Yeah. Awesome. Well,
Um,
yeah, I think the burn stuff really meshed well with this list, and I mean, for just putting it together in 2 hours, I think it looks pretty comprehensive. It's not like anything super out of the this like as far as what you're trying to shoot for. It wasn't like, oh, this card was trash or something like that. It looks like it all meshes pretty well together.
Yeah. So I think like because I think this is quite a long profile already. There's two more points I want to make.
Yeah,
First of all, being the Scirocco's. Um, so a lot of people were asking about Scirocco after the event, like how do I use it? Like what do I bring it in for? All that kind of stuff. And it's pretty simply just like for Blackwing and Vayu. And the main reason for that is that they are really hardcore on deck devastation at the moment. And
yeah. I'm sure
like
you're
especially
someone to
against
know out of anyone about deck devastation virus.
oh, Jesus, oh my God.
Deck dev for 8.
Yeah. And oh my God, that event I was like totally on track to top the whole thing. And like I was completely undefeated up until that single point. That was literally the first game I lost, let alone a match. Oh my God,
Dang,
that just really tilted
unfortunate.
me for the rest of the event. Yeah. So
Uh,
in that sense,
you're like, screw it, I'm putting Sirocco's in my side deck.
exactly. So what you do with this is you just take out the turbo rockets, you place them with Scirocco's, bada bing, bada boom. That's like much better for Blackwings and for Vayu. And the great thing about that, what I really like is that it's one of those cards, like I was mentioning, where it's like one of those extra engines where it really benefits from the Roars and Robokus. Um, and Scirocco is just a really cool thing that you don't need Treeborn for. You just completely just get started, immediately start doing damage, and if they summon another Blackwing on you, you just Waboku that and take that one down next turn. So that's great.
Yeah, in a sense, he's kind of like another burn card because he just pumps and then does a lot of damage.
Yeah. So it's like, well, even Faye is a big fan of this card in all of his burn strategies because, like, yeah, it just does a lot of burn. It's
Yeah,
great.
because like the Blackwing and I guess they kind of just kill off like a lot of like the tier 2 decks, I guess you can say, or just like lesser decks. Where it's like you got deck dev, clean up all the small monsters, you got Icarus attack, wipe through back row. So I think Soroka's a good side deck card for against them, just to like kind of knock down their monsters a little bit.
Yeah.
And then they're also
And
siding a
traditionally,
bunch of
like,
like grave hate too. So like they're gonna have sitting there with crows in their hand for a Treeborn Frog, and then you just slap a Sirocco down, and they might not be ready for that.
yeah, and
Side
like
side
Scirocco
out deep
just
prisons probably against frogs. Uh,
sometimes, yeah, like especially against this one, yeah, for sure.
yeah,
And like as you're saying, like Scirocco just dodges a lot of those frog hate cards, like not only just Crow and Deckdiv, like you're saying, but also Dyna, also Mask of Restrict, also Oppression, also Macro, like whatever. Like there's a lot of stuff it just dodges, which is amazing.
awesome.
Okay, so that's Scirocco. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is the future of the deck, which is something I'm kind of going to be keeping under wraps a little bit, but that already, like, I've taken this deck in two new directions. Um, and I've only kind of mentioned this to like Ring of Destruction a little bit, but I think the main thing I want to do is either add some more support for Turbo Rocket or just replace the Turbo Rocket in general and put in some other engines that kind of do a similar job. Um, and what else? I mean, you could also, I mean, I'm a big fan of Machina stuff, so it is a machine,
Uh oh.
and there's other machines that also do some cool damage. So, like, one of the machines I was looking at was Blast Sphere, because Blast Sphere is like um, a card you have to set face down, and whenever you have a face down in frogs, they always like tend to play around Dupe Frog, just imagining that it's a 2000 attack monster. So in that sense, they tend to attack Blast Sphere with their biggest guy. Um, so it's like one of those machines that would be great in a burn machine frog strategy, but at the same time, that's going to be something I have to spend time
Did you just
developing
hear
because
what he
that's like,
said? Burn
pardon?
machine frog strategy.
I know, right?
He's gone from 2 decks to 3 decks, in one. Well, this is gonna be I can already tell this is gonna be a salvo burn machine monarch frog deck.
And you know what? I can even add my favorite card, Sphere of Chaos, because that's a machine,
Oh
and that
yeah.
adds Black Salvo. And already we're all like 50 cards, so oh my
Buy
god,
your Sphere of Chaoses now. Um,
exactly.
Yeah. I guess I had one thing I want to ask you about with this list. Is like how was a creature swap for you
Picture
overall?
swap was really funny actually because right before the event, I was in those two slots. I had Zoma the Spirit, and that was actually a really cool card I thought at the time because um, it protects your life points. It can be like something you tribute for a monarch. It can also um, burn a lava golem for a lot, and I think actually that's like a card that I might come back to and reconsider. But right before the event, what was his name? Mike. So his name's Mike. He's Italian, and he has like a treeborn frog as his avatar. So he's a big frog player in current as well as in Edison, and so we always talk frogs together. And he happens to just send me a list and a replay of a pure frog strategy with like wetlands in it, and he had creature swap in the list. And I saw in that game that he just like swapped it for like a titanial or something, and he did
Oh my
like a
god.
ton of damage on the spot. And I was like, oh my god, that's exactly the burn card I was looking for. Oh my god, I just totally forgot it existed, right? So yeah, Zomi
Hmm.
went out and Swap went in, and so in the event, it did pretty well actually, and like it kind of did the stated job. Like a lot of games, I think it was on stream versus well, it was on Dimitri on stream with Dimitri. Um, I mean, in that game too, I swapped a Treeborn for a Treeborn, and people were like, "Oh, that's crazy. That's stupid. That's just a -1." But actually, in terms of the tempo, like it actually because I had a Vanity's Fiend in hand that I was trying to set up, it actually like that was the worst case scenario, swapping Treeborn for Treeborn, and it actually wasn't so bad. Like in the actual game, like things didn't go quite that way I was looking to do it, but on paper the swap wasn't that great, or wasn't that bad, I should say. And if it had been a dupe frog, I would have completely come off benefiting in that exchange. But the other things that it did in the events is, for example, versus Ice Queen, when she was playing Vayu, game two, she dropped a Vanity's Fiend on me, and she was like completely ahead, and like, apart from that, she completely would have won. Um, but then I swapped her Fantasy Fiend and like hit her with it for like 7 turns, and she was completely unlucky. I think like she was really tilted by it because I think she must have had like a lot of outs in the deck, and she just left immediately after that game. And I was like, yeah, that was a big sack, and that could not have happened if not for creature swap.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been wanting to play creature swapping decks, and then it's like it just doesn't work out. So I'm glad it worked out for you. It's definitely it's a situational card, but it has like it can have like a big payoff in against situations.
Mm.
Uh,
And even like swapping stuff to the opponent to like hit them with a turbo cannon or like, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can use it.
you can just give them some small guy to run over. You can give them a treeborn frog, just put it in attack mode and crack over it. So you have like a
Yeah.
set Ryko or something.
Yeah, so it ends up being like a really strong burn card in and of itself, which is kind of crazy.
Well, you guys are looking at the best burn deck of the format here. Uh,
Official.
officially burn frogs. Frog burn. Cool. Is there anything else you want to talk about the list, or anything in the tournament that was cool to you, or any
Um,
remarks, or
I mean, as I said before, I'm surprised it did that well, but I'm also like kind of amazed that it really could have won the events. I mean, honestly, it's kind of crazy. So the moral of the story is, and what you should go home and think is, uh, do something crazy, make up a list on the spot the night before, and as long as it has some kind of credentials, as long as like you know that it has some kind of potential, like based on, for example, when I just brought it to DB and won 10 in a row, I was like, okay, you know what? That's a good enough basis for me to just try this and see how it goes. And there you go.
awesome? And yeah, and one thing with this format, like decks tend to get popular, but you always kind of want to be like ahead of the curve, like in a sense as far as the meta, because you want to pick the deck that counters those decks, and then next thing people are going to start countering the deck that counters that deck, and it just goes in like a full circle kind of thing. So it's
Yeah.
always like really interesting to see how the meta works out.
Yeah. So just like completely just do your own thing and drag the meta in whatever direction you want it to be.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, thanks for doing the profile, and you got like third place or top four technically, right? With this deck.
Yeah, third.
Awesome. Well, this is Roghnach's third place frog burn strategy. I keep on wanting to call this like 10 different things, but we're just gonna roll with that. Yeah, do you have any shout outs or anything before we end the profile?
Yeah, Team Ringer's Destruction. So that's our team, and we got like so many great players, and it's just a fantastic little team where we discuss our strategies and we give each other help on events, and yeah, I mean, I think it's really just um, it's just been able to bring all of us to a much higher level than we would be otherwise. And for sure, for me, I know that like when I joined the team, like that's when I really, really, really became super strong at Edison.
Yeah, and like you and Cam rolled up to one of the rivets with that frog hero list that blew everyone by storm. So it was really cool. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, I've also been enjoying the team a lot. It's fun to talk about stuff, ask tips to anyone. Like it, I'm good at making like deck ideas, like a shell, but it's cool to have someone just like say like add their tips or whatever to it because we all have different experiences. Like you play a lot of frogs. We got Silches on the zombies and uh, Cam on Black Wings and me on dragons and ProStorm on everything. So we have a lot of cool experience. And I guess just a tip to anyone watching is like join the discords, get involved with the Edison format, just like talk about it a lot, and then potentially join a team because or just like work with people that you feel comfortable with discussing with because it makes it a lot more interesting. So
yeah, like the more teams there are, the better. And we always like competing against other teams. And what's really cool for me to see right now is how much like people are actually starting to meet up in real life in Edison, and like people who had only just known each other from various discords actually being able to play against each other in real life. And we saw that like at North Carolina event that you played like 2 weeks ago.
yeah, this past week I met up with Cam in Silch's Ruin. I met Cam before at another tournament, but haven't met Silch's, so it was cool to see him in the flesh because I didn't know what he looked like or anything. So it was
Me
cool
neither.
to it's cool to meet up with the people that you've been playing with for a couple years. So and hopefully we'll get to meet too at some point. I know nationals just got announced in North Carolina, so maybe you'll take a trip across the pond and visit.
Well, that's the plan, literally. And because like first of all, there's the IRL Ribbit, which is where I'm going to meet Cameron for the first time.
Oh yes, the IRL ribbit, and that's in June or May, correct?
Yeah, in June.
Okay,
And the
cool.
following month is the NACQ.
Dang, it's all stacking up, and then cool. Well, I appreciate you doing this deck profile on the channel, and I guess we'll catch you guys later.